Good Thursday morning to all of you. I am back again. You get sick of seeing my face. I'm sorry. You're stuck with me. I'm here with my good friend John from Name Coach. Name Coach was so awesome just a couple of weeks ago that I went to John just recently and was like, hey, I've got a slot for you. And he said, let's do it. So John is back. He's a good sport and he's an awesome presenter. And he's going to talk to you today about how to make a good virtual first impression, seeing that all of us are focused on that right now and for the foreseeable future. With that, John, I'm handing it over to you. Good luck.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for having us back. I'm super excited to be presenting to y'all today. 2 weeks ago, we did a presentation on community and belonging during a time of crisis. And I thought this was a great follow-up to it because I think that first impressions have a direct connection to building belonging long term. So hopefully you enjoy the presentation today, and I'm ready to get started and dig in. Now, remember, if you were here 2 weeks ago, I do like to make it interactive and ask questions. So please be prepared to have some questions asked. Participate by adding comments to the chat on the right-hand side. And Mark will jump in and say a few things so everybody can hear it if you don't see it on your screen. And then I have members of my team available to answer any questions that you have throughout the presentation. So let's get started. I wanted to start with a quote. I don't know if you folks are familiar with Malcolm Gladwell, but I really do like this quote. We don't know where our first impressions come from or precisely what they mean, so we don't always appreciate their fragility. And I find that very true, right? I think first impressions are very very important to, yes, initial, interactions and engagements and short-term impact, but I think there's a long-term impact as well important to focus on, especially during these times. So I want to start off by asking a question right away. So like I said, definitely ready for some engagement. We'll take about 30 seconds or so to get some input on this. But I wanted to start by asking, how long do we have to make a good first impression? And it's not a trick question, I promise. But take some time and put your thoughts just in the comments. No wrong answers. So please just, like I said, take another 20 seconds or so and put your thoughts in there. And so normally when I do this, I see that there's anything from a minute to 30 seconds, 20 seconds, all the way down to 2 or 3 seconds. And so what I like to always tell folks during that time, y'all have already made a first impression of me in a significantly shorter amount of time. Typically that first impression happens in a blink of an eye. So the Association for Psychological Science says in a blink of an eye that we make a first impression. And those impressions, like I said, can have very lasting impacts, right? And like I said, so no wrong answer. A blink of an eye is very quick, but a couple seconds, is very similar. And I think things change though in a virtual world. So when we're in person, a blink of an eye is typically by the appearance of somebody, unfortunately. But virtually, those things change, and we're going to hit on that here in just a few minutes. So lasting impacts of first impressions. I hit on this just briefly, but I think this highlights it pretty well. I know there's not a lot of detail on this graph, so I'll explain it. But a positive first impression naturally has a short-term impact, right? So a positive first impression has positive short-term impacts, whether I was somebody that was going for a job interview or it's a university that's trying to recruit students. Positive first impressions are typically going to lead to you getting that job or you recruiting that student. But long-term impact, I think, is just as important, if not more important, is it focuses on belonging, creating that community that we talked about just a few weeks ago, and then helping with a better campus culture and overall student retention and student happiness. Now, on the other side of the coin, a negative first impression is going to have an immediate negative short-term impact, right? So you might not get that student that you're recruiting. If you do somehow still manage to get that job or to get that student, then it takes a longer time to build up the relationship with that individual to help with those positive long-term impacts that I'm talking about of belonging and community. So I think it highlights the importance of why a first impression has a long-lasting impact. But I want to talk about some of the things that we're experiencing today. And there's so many things that I could talk about with first impressions. I could talk about your students' first impressions with their faculty, or a faculty member's first impression with their students, university's first impression with the students that could be coming in. There's a lot of different areas. I do want to focus more on the university's impression to students, as well as faculty first impressions to students as well. So during this virtual world, right? And I actually had a slide very similar to this about 2 weeks ago, talking about virtual connections and their limitations. So Cognizant and Microsoft did a study over 12,000 or over 10,000 people, sorry, seeing how effective the following ways of communication are when it comes to building relationships, making a solid first impression. And I was talking about how face-to-face always takes the cake. You see here, 93% of people say face-to-face is the way to do it, where telephone, email, text, conference calls, and video conferencing are on the lower end of that, right? And so that's really interesting because right now we don't really have too many ways to replicate the face-to-face experience. We do have to focus more on the video conferencing and conference calls. A lot of our partner institutions have been doing virtual campus tours, which, similar to a video conference, virtual orientations that are coming up for the fall semester. And I think through those conversations, we've been talking a lot about first impressions. How do you ensure that students still want to come, to join your university if it is virtual this fall? I think it's been a very big topic. And then, that orientation experience, if you can't do it in person, how do you make a good first impression there? And I think there are some limitations. And these are 5 problems that I wanted to point out with the virtual communication and making solid first impressions. So I wanted to start with a staged environment, right? I think we all know this. We've seen the Zoom backgrounds that makes it look like I'm on the beach. You can take a look around my office right now. You know that the rest of my house is not this clean, right? That's for sure. Especially with the kids running around making a mess, but I knew that I was going to be talking to y'all this morning. So of course, I'm going to make sure that my background looks great. So it's a staged environment. It's not as realistic as what you get in person. I think through virtual communication that naturally there is a lack of empathy. It's hard to have the same level of communication virtually as you do in person. I think we have more distractions, right? That's on both sides of the communication. So if faculty are sitting down first day of class virtually with their students and doing some sort of onboarding, they have distractions at home, and students have distractions at home, whether that's family members, friends, just stress. It could be a whole list of things. Luckily, I don't have the kids today, so there's no distractions in my background like normal. Normally, they're running around screaming every Zoom call that I have. Lack of emotion. I think that goes back to the communication piece, right? It's hard to show communication through virtual communication. It's hard to show your happiness, sadness, whatever you may be feeling. It's also hard to gauge what your students are feeling, whether, like I said, they're prospective students or current students, that first day of orientation, first day of class, etc. And then one that I really do like to highlight is it increases competition. In this particular case, is as far as making first impressions. I use a campus tour as an example all the time. I relate it to buying a house. I just bought a house a couple months ago, and it's great. You can go on all these tools and take like a 360 virtual tour of a house. I don't know how many of you have done this. I'm sure there's plenty. But how often do you look at that virtual tour and you're like, wow, this place is amazing. And then you get there and it's not the same experience, right? I think that in this world, anybody can make their campus and their community look appealing. And students that normally can travel to maybe a handful of campuses to do these tours or to do, to see if they want to go to your university, you can only visit but so many. But in a virtual world, you could visit dozens. And it increases that competition. Your first impression is that much more important to making it to the students quickly like I said, having that long-term impact, getting them to choose your university, having a great first semester, and keeping them long-term. So even though there are some negatives to the virtual communication and virtual connections, virtual first impressions, I think there's good news. There's many things that we can do quickly and easily to make positive first impressions in a virtual setting. So I'm going to focus on a few today, and we're about to ask for some more, some more interaction here and engagement from the crowd. So I'm going to focus on, yes.
Really quick, let's jump in here. So we have a lot of our friends that are here regularly with us: Kelly, Janaya, Marcus, Eddie, everybody else. Thanks for coming. Eddie just asked, does our perception of this change as time goes on, as there is more comfortability with virtual communications? What are your thoughts?
It definitely can. It definitely can. I think we should be part of that change, though, right? Focusing on the things that we could do now to create the most positive first impressions with the tools that we do have, utilizing them the right way, creating a new standard, right? If we go with not focusing on the first impressions and just kind of doing, kind of the day-to-day, I guess, then I think it could have a long-term negative impact. And getting comfortable with the negative would not be good at all, right? So I think just focusing on what we can do to continue to improve those first impressions, create community and belonging virtually, is going to have a long-term positive impact as these virtual communications do stay, right? I do think that even as we get back to in-person, whether it's university or just time out in the world, I think that virtual connections are going to be here for a while.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great question. So yeah, as I was saying, the solutions to these problems, I want to focus on two. I'm going to keep it really, really simple today. The first one seems like a no-brainer, but I do want to highlight a few things that we put together for you here about focusing on the first impression, and what that means. And I think that ties into Eddie's question, like, what is it that we could do to create that new norm, right? And make it positive. And then number two, thinking about the entire organization and culture. So I'm going to start with first impressions. Let's take a little bit of time here. Tell us and tell your peers what you're doing at your university to focus on first impressions, and open it up. Like I said, you could focus on recruitment. You could focus on first day in the classroom. It doesn't matter what your role is at the university. It could be an advisor. Tell us what you're doing to make first impressions with your students. And let's chat about those for a few minutes before diving into some of the things that we're gonna recommend. And I know Mark's gonna pop a few of those up on the screen, and jump in and say those out loud as well. And then, like I said, we'll take a few minutes to chat about those, because I think there's so many ways to do it. And like I said, no wrong ways. So please do share.
So Janaya, our friend, who is with us regularly, we love having her on here. I called, texted, and emailed all my students the Sunday before class started. That's awesome.
Love that. Especially with the summer semester already starting for most of us. That is amazing. That's a great way to make a first impression, right? Using multiple different, virtual communications to make that impact. I love that.
So the question we're talking about right now, for anybody that's just joining in, we're wondering, what are you doing as a teacher, as a supervisor, an administrator, whatever you are, at the K-12, at the university level? What is it that you're doing to make the very best virtual first impression you can? It's like we've got Kelly. First impression is on faculty and making them comfortable with seeking help from a Canvas perspective. Love it.
Love that. Yep. As an administrator, that's very true. Yep.
Totally. Usually try to make things a bit of a skeptical to start with my staff. I make a fun video with some character, try to build in some form of competition or game, get them out of the seat.
Love that.
That a boy, Eddie.
Love that thought process. Perfect. Well, I think that, the commonality between what we're saying there is what we're focusing on, how we're focusing on those first impressions, right? So it's really interesting because there's so many different cues that we have, whether it's in an interview or whether it's the first day of school or whether it's, getting students to come to campus. There's different cues we look at, and three that I wanted to focus on: emotional cues being how you act, visual cues, how you look, and verbal cues as what and how you say it, right? And in person, emotional and visual cues are actually typically the most important thing to a first impression. As I mentioned, a first impression happens in a blink of an eye. It's a little unfortunate that how you act and how you look typically make that first impression. Like I said, whether that's first day you're sitting up in front of your class, or that's when a student comes and visits the campus and the advisors that they're communicating with. But when you're doing it virtually, that changes pretty drastically. Your verbal cues that were typically kind of in the middle, what you say and how you say it, are increasingly more important in a virtual world. And I kind of highlighted it here, like video and phone is more a medium to high. That's a change from what we're used to, right? So how do we focus on those verbal cues? I love some of the things that you were just saying on how you're engaging with your faculty, with your students. And like I said, it goes right down to what you say and how you say it, making that solid first impression. So very, very simple things to do. But I wanted to break down, this is a simple blueprint. We do expand upon this, and we have some great resources available. If you're interested in a larger blueprint and additional information on this, please do just reach out and put your email in the chat. I'll have somebody from my team reach out and get that to you. Now, verbal cues are made up of four main components. So language choice, response, accent, and use of name. So being a company that does focus on name pronunciation and gender identity, creating community and belonging for students, I always do like to highlight that piece, that a great verbal cue to build a first impression is getting somebody's name right, right? Whether this is the first day of class and you are sending out emails and texts to your students and maybe jumping on a quick phone call, talking to that student directly, getting their name right, building that relationship. This could be great for, first day orientations. Like I said, a lot of our partner institutions are doing virtual orientations. And during those virtual orientations, they are breaking folks into small groups. And they're actually making slides of each student that's in that group that has a photo, their name pronunciation, any additional information they want to share about themselves, whether it's fun facts, where they're from, language that's spoken, it could be pronouns, you name it, all of that could be on the slide. It allows these students to connect with one another and build great first impressions amongst one another. And it, like I said, leaves a lasting great first impression on the university. And maybe if there's an advisor that's tied to that or something like that, I think it's great. It is really interesting because as we do focus on verbal cues, things like language choice, response, speech patterns or accents, those take a very, very long time to get perfect. None of us do it perfect unless, that's what we're trained in. But like I said, something as simple as getting a name right, making that student feel connected, building that strong first impression, really simple and easy to do. I did want to say too, because I don't want to make this a sales pitch at all. If you need or want additional resources at any time, whether it's building first impressions in the classroom, how to make a great virtual orientation for your students, incoming students, please just put your email in the chat and we will reach out and give you those resources. No obligation of using us, but we'd be happy to tell you more if you're interested. But like I said, we do have resources that we just want to share with the community during this time to share best practices and continue to build that community and belonging that we're so focused on. And the next part here, thinking about the entire organization in culture. So another place that I just wanted to stop for a minute or two and ask for a little engagement here. So when we're thinking about the entire organization and culture, what is it that we're seeing campus-wide, maybe initiatives that are being done on creating virtual first impressions? New things that you maybe haven't done in the past that we're doing today, just given where we are in the world and really the need to use virtual communication to do this. So I'd love to take a few minutes just to get some some ideas here on what folks are doing and new ways that you're using virtual tools to build first impressions.
So everybody who just joined us, I'm here with my good friend John from Name Coach, one of our excellent partners. John, why don't you repeat that question once more, and I'll start reading some comments that have come in that maybe aren't specifically about that question, but that relate to what we're talking about.
Absolutely. So, as we're talking about creating strong first impressions, would love to get some feedback and input on what your university is doing to, from an organizational, level to focus on first impressions, creating community and belonging in this virtual world. Like I said, new ideas, new tips, tricks that we could share, best practices, and kind of chat a little bit about.
So anybody who's out there listening right now, jump there into the comments section of whatever network platform you're on, and tell us what it is you're using. What tools are you using? How are you better enabling creating those virtual first impressions? Looks like we've got here Travis or Barbara, whichever one it is. Hi there. Saying that she recorded video on my homepage, welcoming students to class, follow with a Zoom meeting, first day of online class. Kind of introduces that person and activity into the season.
I love that. Love that, right? And I noticed that a lot of these involve multiple, multiple forms of virtual communication. Love the idea of doing the video. They know who you are. Creates that kind of personal touch. That's awesome.
Patricia's talking here about how she uses Zoom and Remind. She had a good comment here that the choice of words is extremely important. Some of my students are not well educated, but want to improve their employment circumstance. If I'm using words or phrases they don't understand, they turn off.
That's a great point. And it goes back to those verbal cues being even more important, right? If we can't see that student face to face when we're writing something or using terms or phrases they may not be familiar with, then we don't know that they're already disengaged, right? I love that point, and it really does hit home. Verbal cues are so important, no matter what level of education you're talking about. Definitely.
Here's our man, Chris Giles. Chris, how are you? Chris has been on. Chris was actually the father of this program, John, believe it or not. He came with the big idea one weekend. We pulled it together, and now 40-something streams later, here we are. Chris says a strong first impression can start with connecting, sharing about yourself before asking for students to share about themselves.
Absolutely. Yep. I definitely agree with that. I think that that's something that we do commonly miss, right? It's very easy to talk about us, but yes, getting to know your students. And like I said, that's why we talk a lot about name pronunciation and gender identity, and in really understanding who a student is, where they're from, cultural backgrounds, you name it. I think it's a great way to focus on first impressions. Like I said, ultimately focus on belonging and community. And I can tell you these first impressions do go a long way. Our research is showing us that the long-term impacts are greater than you would think. And that first impression could actually lead to a student's success or potentially failure at a university. So I love hearing that.
Totally. Kelly is talking about more faculty members trying to use video conferencing like Zoom to keep a more personal relationship. I think that we're all seeing that, Kelly, not only with students, but in whatever space we're in. The amount of virtual conference calls that we're all in today is pretty astounding.
Agreed. I know I've noticed for us, what used to be a phone call for a lot of people is now a Zoom meeting. I think people crave community and belonging. Yeah. And we hit on that about 2 weeks ago in our last live stream, right? About how people really do need that to feel connected and to have that community. It's a great way to do it. I know I made the joke the other week about how when you have too many people, it's kind of crazy and tough to get everybody talking. But there's some new tools. And I know the one that we're using right now allows for some really interactive and fun features to help with that community and having your voice, for sure.
Totally. Janaya, our friend, welcome back. She's including studio videos, so Canvas studio videos with each weekly announcement. Love it, Janaya. Totally hear you on hate listening to your own voice. I think that you're in the same boat as most people. Keep it up because your students, I'm sure, are loving it.
That's awesome.
We've got Noel here saying my intro. Oh, this is fun. My intro assignment is for everyone to share a music video. Share why the song is important to them and how it makes them feel.
At first, I thought you were going to say that you're going to make them do a music video. That'd be interesting too, right? But that's awesome. I think in music, right, that really does show who we are. Everybody finds something unique out of a song, depending on what's going on in their life and how they're feeling. That's really neat. Have you done it already? If I may ask. Sorry, I'm asking a direct question, and it might take a bit to type it there. But have you done that this summer already?
Noel, let us know. John,
Yeah,
if you were a music video right now, which would you be?
if I was a music video right now, that's a great question. So I listen to pretty much everything you could possibly imagine. It just depends on the day. Um, I'm in a bit of a country vibe right now. I don't really know why. That's not the norm for me. I don't know if I could pick just one song. But I could tell you one artist that I think's been pretty solid in the country, world, which is Luke Combs, if you guys are familiar. So I would have to pick the artist, not the music video. If you gave me more time though, I'll send you one. You could share it out with the community, Mark.
Now we're talking.
And then, and unfortunately, well, I say unfortunately, my kids watch Disney all the time. So the music videos in my house recently have been, Frozen or Lion King or something, and it's all day, every day.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the amount of times that I listen to or watch Baby Shark at this point
Oh
still
gosh.
is astounding. So all you teachers
I read
out
somewhere
there,
that it's the third most watched video on YouTube of all time. Second or
well, it doesn't
third.
surprise me one bit. I think I make up probably half of those. Melanie Bamfield, I like the music video idea. What a great way to get students engaged at the start of class. Totally agree. Love it.
I like that.
Okay, John, let's keep going.
Definitely. And I am stealing the music video idea. I'm going to do it with my team too. And it actually would be interesting to see how that changes throughout the semester, right? Kind of what they're feeling as you continue to move on. So I love that. And it goes into talking about like the organization in your community at your school or at your university or at your college. And this slide is just a small piece of what I mean about, kind of the organizational focus on this and the organizational impact. It's kind of the circle of life of first impressions and things like that at the university. And I've already hit on some of them, but I think that focusing on prospective students, your incoming students, current students, your team, and retention is a really good way to look at it. Because as I walk through this just a little bit, I think you're going to see that it really does go full circle. So when you look at first impressions, you look at how that creates community and belonging, and you start with your prospective students, you're going to see that you are attracting more students, right? So like I said, it doesn't matter if it's in person or virtually. First impressions are going to attract more students. You're going to recruit your top candidates, and you're going to build strong connections from the beginning. And that really starts a new organizational culture, a campus culture for faculty, for staff, for students, for teachers. It doesn't matter. Everybody starts falling into this if you start with your incoming students, because they're going to help continue to kind of follow this circle, build this cycle, and really focus on, like I said, community and belonging. Your current students are going to have an improved experience, whether it's virtual or on campus. They're going to have an increased feeling of belonging, and they're going to continue to have an increased feeling of community, and they're going to help build that community. Like I said, 2 weeks ago, we talked a lot about building community, what that looks like, and how students really work together to do that, and working in clubs and in groups can really help with that. Students that feel like they belong, students that have that lasting impression, they're going to really help continue to build that. And then I go to the team, right? You could put team first if you want to. You could look at this a lot of different ways. But like I said, it just continues to go in a nice circle here. Teams, whether that's students, whether that's sports, whether that's faculty, you can look at teams as a lot of different things. But you're going to see higher engagement and reduced turnover. That's with your teams, your faculty team, staff, administrators. Like I said, student teams. You're really going to notice a higher level of engagement. Everybody focusing on those first impressions, focusing on one another, really helps. And like I said, we've already heard great feedback with our partner universities, colleges, schools on the lasting impact of the first impression with their teams. And then retention. This is huge right now. So like I said, I have a lot of additional resources I could share with you on all of this. I do want to make it light and interactive, but retention's a very interesting one right now. And I was reading just the other day, I was talking with our CEO, Praveen Shanbag, and he was reading an article that was talking about how in Los Angeles County in particular, that 20% of their K-12 students, since things have moved virtually, are, quote, missing. They're not participating, right? That's really sad to hear. Um, and I think that it's something that, yes, Los Angeles County posted these numbers. I think we're going to continue to see that. And I don't think it's just K-12, right? I think it's going to have a lasting impact on, the university. It's going to be community college. Like I said, it's going to be high school, middle school. It doesn't matter. As things move virtually, and if they stay virtual, we are at risk of losing our students, having more students take, gap years, maybe not coming back. And I think first impressions, lasting impressions are extremely important to focus on retention. So this one to me became the most important after having that conversation just the other day with my CEO. And I think that we should all look at it that way. How do we make sure that we are focusing on our students every single step of the way, from first impressions to last impressions, to make sure that those students feel welcome even in a virtual world? And I think something that I talked about 2 weeks ago, something that just got brought up in this conversation of the texting and calling and emailing and continuing to leave that impression on your students is going to help a lot. I mentioned here just 3 little bullet points of improving experience, preventing attrition, and building a positive reputation. I think that is the lasting impact, is that positive reputation. Those students that were thinking about leaving, not coming back, they stayed, they had that great experience. They're going to continue to spread the good word about your campus. And then it goes right back to building and bringing in those prospective students.
John,
yeah.
Interesting comment that came up. Noelle, who gets the award today for this incredible idea of having her students share a music video, which then we've had a whole bunch of comments and conversations past that. Paul Butterfield, my friend, came in and said, what about everybody sharing their personal hype song and then creating a classic playlist? Love it. Noelle just brought up an interesting piece about equity, though, which we know is a huge issue. She says access to technology is an economic issue for many students. And that's something that I think we all have to be very aware of. I mean, there's many who, maybe there's a 20 to 30% drop off in XYZ county. How many of those are simply based off of not having the resources they need to be able to connect?
Absolutely. We see it a lot. I live in Phoenix, very similar demographic, smaller city in comparison to Los Angeles, but it is the 5th largest city in the country. And I have a lot of friends that are teachers. I have some that are in, private K-12. I have some that are in public, and some that are in, lower socioeconomic groups or areas of Phoenix. And that's been a struggle. I've been seeing a lot of amazing things that companies are doing, that the state's doing to provide resources, but they're having a hard time getting in contact with those families. It's a really, really valid point. In the K-12 space and in education, but in K-12 in particular, building the relationships with families, first impressions with the parents, and like I said, building the relationship and building community with the parents, if at all possible, the sooner the better, to help with that too. So even if you are finding resources to help with those students, that you can at least get them to them. I know that one of the districts out here, one that I know in particular, I'm sure so many are doing it, they're actually providing laptops and Wi-Fi to every single student in their school, to open up the ability for them to participate and engage, which I think is really cool. So nobody's left out. But once again, if you can't find those students after the first couple weeks of everything that happened, it is very tough. But like I said, I think it's one of those things that hopefully gets us thinking, right? That was kind of the idea today of what can we do, from the beginning, every single class that we teach, every single, campus tour or virtual campus tour, every single orientation, what does that look like? And how do we make this lasting impact so that those students are hungry to learn, hungry to stay? and feel like they have that community and belonging. And like I said, for those students that have a hard time finding those resources, does it make them hungry to go find them, right? There's a lot out there right now that we're all doing. And I love the ideas that have been shared today. A great way to do that. So like I said, I wanted to keep it light and fun. I loved what we learned today. I loved the music video idea, the playlist idea. I actually think that one's really fun. I mentioned 2 weeks ago that we do these stand-up meetings every single day with our team. And those stand-up meetings are just to talk about life and just kind of talk about what's going on in the world, whatever we want to talk about. But I am going to bring this idea, the music videos and the playlist, to the next one tomorrow morning, and see what playlist we actually come up with maybe tomorrow that we listen to over the weekend, and kind of understand one another that much better and chat about it on Monday. So I actually would love to, if you guys try it, right, please send me an email and let me know how it goes. So I'm going to go to the last slide here that actually has my contact information. Like I said, we have a lot of resources on this. All of these sessions that we're doing, and hopefully we get to do a few more, are about bringing the community together, focusing on community and belonging for everybody, whether that's students, teachers, faculty, staff, admins, doesn't matter. And then for any corporate folks joining us, for your organization, for your employees, you name it. So please just give me an email, send an email to john@name-coach.com. You can go to our website, which is name-coach.com. There's some great resources. There's a purple banner at the top of our website that has some great COVID-19 resources, as well as virtual recognition and events information. Like I said, I didn't want to focus just on virtual orientations, but that is something that's coming up here soon. The conversation of, are we online in the fall or not? And even if we are, do we have time to do an in-person orientation? We have been working with dozens of universities and schools to work on those. And we have some really cool ideas and resources to help you on that. So if you would like to learn more, email me, go to the website, sign up, or put your email in the comments. But awesome. I would also, if we have anything else, love to hear more best practices if we still have it. Otherwise, I hope everybody has an amazing rest of your Thursday and a great weekend coming up.
Thank you so much, John. Just to close things out, we've been talking today about how to create and make the very best first impressions virtually, which is what a lot of us are dealing with today. We've got our great partner from Name Coach here. Wanted to call out a couple of comments. We started talking at the end about equity and equitable access. The issue that there's so many students who are kind of, they fall off, which is hard to see. There are a significant amount of institutions who are doing an incredible job. Deborah calls that out. Beth, one of our fantastic customers from Broward out in Florida, they're the 6th largest district in the U.S.
Wow.
And they've provided laptops to all the students along with internet. I mean, what an incredible story to hear about a district who is massive. I mean, the amount of students that Broward deals with is huge. Mm-hmm. And the fact that they're going to the lengths of, we want everybody to stay connected, is pretty awesome. So thank you, wonderful schools like Broward and all the other districts and universities that are doing so much to help our students. Teachers, keep your heads up. You're doing great stuff. Thanks again to our wonderful partners. We're back again, as you know, tomorrow morning at 10:30 a.m. Mountain Time. We'll see you tomorrow morning, everybody. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you all. Take care.